Every day that you go fishing is an opportunity for you to learn something. And in every single video that I do, I simply try to tell you the things that I have learned about bass fishing along the way. And in today's video, this is a tip that really can make or break your day out on the water. And I think it's really good, so stay tuned. It's gonna be a good one.
This video is brought to you by sportsmansoutfitters.com. One of the best ways to help me bring more videos like this to you is by supporting the companies that support this channel. Not only has Sportsman's Outfitters backed BassFishingHQ for more than a year, but they have some of the best deals and prices on both fishing gear and hunting gear. So if you're looking for any tackle or equipment, click those links down below for Sportsman's Outfitters right now.
Several years ago, actually back in 2017, I was preparing for a tournament on Lake Oneida in New York. Lake Oneida is a beautiful clear water lake with both largemouth and smallmouth. Now, this was not the first time that I had fished Lake Oneida. I had fished it several times before, and there typically is some sort of topwater bite on this lake. And if you guys know anything about me, I absolutely love to fish a topwater bait. Now, during the practice of this event, I actually had one of the weirdest things happen to me while I was out there on the water. Because I love throwing a topwater so much, I always typically pick up a topwater and just try to cover a lot of water. On Oneida, you have a lot of large grass lines and grass flats, and picking up a topwater and just covering a lot of water, keeping that trolling motor on high, is one of the best ways to locate a group of fish. The only problem that I kept seeing though is that during practice, I had a ton of smallmouth that were coming up to my bait and they were just slapping at the bait, and they would hit it, they'd knock it out of the water, but they wouldn't hook up with the bait. I tried several different colors of the same bait and it just didn't seem to matter. They just kept slapping at the bait. Now, on the last day of practice for this event, I was still trying to figure out what topwater that these fish would commit to, and I actually made a really long bomb cast, and at the very end of my cast, I got a backlash, and that bait hit the water, and as I was sitting there and I was picking out the backlash on my bait cast reel, a smallmouth came up and absolutely clobbered my bait, and I set the hook and I reeled it in, and that fish had that bait so good. It had come up there and I mean just clobbered it. So here I am after getting so many blow-ups and so many fish that weren't committing to the bait, and all of a sudden I'm letting that bait just sit out there and a bass fully commits to the bait. So at that point, I actually picked up a popper because I thought I could work a popper really slow across the surface and maybe get some of those bites, and it just wasn't happening. So I actually switched back over to that spook. I made another long cast out there and I just let that bait sit on the surface of the water, and another bass came up and got it, and he ate it again. He fully committed to the bait. I put that fish in the boat and I'm just sitting there like dumbfounded, like, is this gonna be my pattern? Like, am I gonna go out there, cast this bait out and just let it sit? First day of the tournament rolls around, I get to one of the areas that I want to fish. I sling my topwater bait out there. I'm letting that bait sit. Nothing hits it. As I start to reel that bait in, a giant comes up there and gets that bait. And I literally mean a giant, and I literally mean it gets my bait, because a pike came up there and absolutely destroyed my topwater, broke it off. So as I'm digging through my topwater box to get another one of those baits, I come across this bait right here. This is an Evergreen JT 115. Now, the thing that is interesting about this bait is, listen, if I hold all the hooks here and keep them from making noise, listen to the rattle of the bait. Nothing. It's a completely silent bait. There are no rattles on the inside. Sure, you have a little bit of hook noise, but there's really no rattles to it at all. And it really just kind of clicked with me in that exact moment that maybe the bass just didn't want any noise on their topwater baits. I had been using a Vixen, which is a pretty noisy topwater bait. And it kind of dawned on me that maybe those fish didn't want all those rattles, and that is why they were hitting it while it was sitting completely still in the water, because it was making absolutely no noise at all. So this is crazy. I literally tied this bait on, and within 15 minutes of tying on this bait, I had over 16.5 pounds in the boat. And not only that, I had caught all those fish as I was actually walking that bait back and forth. That same way where all those fish had been coming up, swiping at it and missing it and knocking it out of the water, they were fully committing to this bait. And at that moment, I really realized how important sound is to a bass. Now I went on to finish 18th out of 200 anglers in that event, and I caught every single fish on this topwater bait right here. Now later in that year, I was actually fishing another Bassmaster Open on Lake Douglas in Tennessee, and during the practice of that tournament, there was really one topwater that I could get bit on. All the other ones, bass would again come up there, slap it, and miss it. And guess what topwater it was? It was another Evergreen JT. Now this is actually the smaller one. This is the 95 size. But the thing that I like about the 95 is that although it is small, it still has 3 hooks on it. So you have an extremely good hookup ratio with this bait. So not only did it really work for smallmouth up in New York, but it also worked for largemouth down in Tennessee. And then guess what? In 2020, I fished another Bassmaster Open on Lake Hartwell in South Carolina, and the spotted bass in that lake were absolutely destroying this Evergreen JT bait. Now, what was interesting about fishing it on Lake Hartwell was that the first day we had slick, calm conditions and bright sunshine, and I was executing when a lot of other guys were missing fish on top. But guess what? The very next day, we had some cloud cover, we had a little bit of wind, and I was fishing that same JT Evergreen, and I was simply not catching fish with it. After the first day, I had 14 plus pounds. I was sitting in like 12th place in that tournament. And on the second day, I could not get bit, and the ones that were biting it were just missing it. So I had really thought that the bass had pretty much gotten off the topwater bite altogether during that second day. But after I came into weigh-in, I was hearing stories of guys that were actually catching them a lot better on topwaters that day, and they were using your more traditional, louder, noisy baits, while I was not getting a lot of bites on the JT. I am not trying to sell you this bait. I'm trying to tell you the importance of what sound does to a bass, and that there are days where bass really like something that has a lot of noise, and there are days where bass like something that is really subtle, something that doesn't have a lot of action. A general rule of thumb is on those really slick, calm days where there is no breeze, there is no wind, where bass can really get a good look at your bait, they can hear it from a distance, those are the days that you want to go natural with your baits. Those are the days that I really like to pick up a bait like the JT Evergreen, because it makes enough commotion to attract the fish, but it's not too much noise where it kind of overpowers the bass. Now, on the flip side, there are days where you want that noise. On those days where you might be fishing with a lot of wind, maybe there's a lot of current, those are times where you really need to draw a bass in to your bait. And using a bait that doesn't have enough noise may actually cost you fish because they simply can't hear it over the choppiness of the waves and everything else that's going on. And I really think that this applies to a lot more than just a topwater bait. It applies to other techniques. You know, if you're out there and you're cranking, there are days where bass really like a balsa bait or a wood bait that has no rattles in it because it is just a more natural sound to them. And then there are days where they want that big rattle. Now, if you are interested in picking up some of these Evergreen JTs, I will tell you that the hook that comes on them is pretty crappy. It's very sharp, it's very sticky sharp, but it can bend out pretty easily. And although you might hook up with a lot of fish, I have seen where those hooks bend out and will cause you to lose a lot of those fish. So on the bigger size JT, the 115, I like to replace it with a Berkley Fusion number 4 size hook, and I will use a feathered treble on there a lot. Now on the smaller, the 95, I like a number 6 size Berkley Fusion hook. If you guys are curious to know kind of my whole topwater system all together, like my rod, my reel, my line, what I like to do with topwaters, how I like to hook up better with fish on topwaters, I made a full video right here that talks about all that stuff, how you can connect more with bass that are hitting your bait. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I think that you're gonna enjoy this one as well. Please comment below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.